Hello starfarers, and welcome back to the Tetra Galaxy Telecast. For today's transmissions topic, I'll be taking a look at the various nicknames characters possessed in the Metroid franchise, along with some common sayings in the series. I won't be counting fan nicknames or sayings. It must appear in some form of official Metroid media or another to count. So, shoutouts to Chadmiral, Dane, and Larry, but that's the last you'll be hearing of them today. I'm also only counting canon entries, that way I'm only getting the nicknames and phrases that exist in-universe as well as real life. Non-canon entries may or may not be mentioned, but the amount of titles a character holds will only be those in canon standing. And now that we have all that out of the way, and with no further delay, let's begin. Being the main character of the series, Samus has acquired a multitude of titles. Her nicknames vary greatly in their connotative implications depending on who gave her the nickname in question. To the space pirates, she's the Hunter clad in metal, or the Hunter for short, the latter of which is Samus's most well-known nickname. The name reflects the pirates' fear of Samus after she dunked on their fortress planet and their leaders. In contrast, the Talon 4 Chozo, who knew of her only by prophetic visions, dubbed Samus the Entrusted One, showing their faith in Samus to fulfill their visions and drive the Phazon plaguing their home away. Samus had three other nicknames from Prime: the Defender, the Hatchling, and the Newborn. However, those three were only present in the North American version, so those have since been retconned. Meanwhile, in the Samus and Joey manga, some galactic citizens take to calling her the Guardian of the Galaxy. Sounds familiar. Anyways, this name is actually a deviation from her old title of Protector of the Galaxy, which comes from the Super Metroid comics. Of course, only the former of these titles remains canon to the franchise, but it's interesting to see that the creator of the manga took inspiration from the older, more obscure works in the series nonetheless. The title is indicative of the average person's view of Samus, as even though most don't know much about her, they have heard of her legendary missions, most especially her assault of Zebes in Zero Mission. This name could have been used to describe Samus earlier in the series, chronologically speaking of course, given that Samus was renowned even before her Zero Mission for completing missions once thought impossible, but Samus and Joey is the only place where this nickname is known to be used. The last few titles Samus has garnered are given to her by some of her peers. The most frequent and recognized of these nicknames is Lady, which is what her former commanding officer, Adam Malkovich, affectionately refers to her as, often before sending her off to whatever mission or tasks she's being assigned to. The nickname has appeared in key moments, like the plot twist of Metroid Fusion, Adam's sacrifice in Other M, and as a hint to one of Dread's plot twists. It's said that Adam calls her Lady as an acknowledgement of her tragic past, used in a dignified manner. While Adam refers to Samus as Lady, Anthony Higgs, another former squad mate of hers, refers to her as Princess. The reason he calls her this isn't directly specified the way Adam's nickname for Samus is, though I suspect that it's just his own version of Adam's nickname for her, with the same intended effect. That can't be confirmed though, since it's not exactly known if Anthony is aware of her past, but either way the nickname definitely has a more casual vibe to it. Possibly the least formal of Samus's nicknames comes from Gandrada, who simply refers to her as Sammy, which just reflects Gandrada's more aloof and nonchalant personality. While some of Samus's nicknames are from other sources, I imagine most of you have noticed that most of Samus's nicknames come from the Prime subseries. Trust me, that pattern will only continue and exasperate throughout the rest of the broadcast. Just speaking on Samus herself though, she's got many nicknames over the years. In all, between the Hunter clad in metal, the Entrusted One, Guardian of the Galaxy, Lady, Princess, and Sammy, Samus stands at a substantial 7 canon nicknames, along with 4 more decanonized nicknames in the Defender, the Hatchling, the Newborn, and Protector of the Galaxy. Not too shabby for the leading lady. Speaking of Lady, while many of you knew Samus held that title, did you know she's not the only character in the series to have the nickname Lady? The chronological first of Samus's clones, Dark Samus, also has that nickname, given to her by an unnamed space pirate in a canon supplementary piece known as Another Side Story. The pirate who created the logs present in this tale actually gives Dark Samus a few of her nicknames. Before his mind is possessed, he takes to calling her things such as Dark One and Black Demon. given that she attacked the pirates on separate occasions, stole their Phazon, and had brainwashed some of his comrades up to that point. He too is brainwashed at one point, after which he refers to Dark Samus as Lady, as I mentioned before. She also earns the title of the Esteemed One, a nice foil to Samus's title in Prime 1, sounding less duty-bound and highly but healthily respected like Samus's nickname, but rather more self-absorbed and worshipped. Of course, Dark Samus also has a few nicknames not from another side story. The only one that is given directly to Dark Samus in her more humanoid form is the Dark Hunter, which the unfortunate pirates on Aether called her after finding her, initially believing her to be Samus in a new suit. The name stuck after they found out that she wasn't Samus, but a whole new problem entirely, as a way to distinguish the two hunters. The other nicknames Dark Samus has are from her previous form, the Metroid Prime, including the name Metroid Prime itself, which is kind of weird, as that's her old form's actual name, but it becomes an alternative title when she acquires Samus's Phazon suit and becomes officially known as Dark Samus. More unarguably a nickname, the Chozo of Talon 4 knew the Metroid Prime by another name, as they called it the Worm in their prophecies, which is honestly hilarious that from a certain point of view, a bunch of birds were terrified of a worm, which you wouldn't expect to be the case for obvious reasons. She's also called Test Subject ZD by the Space Pirates, but that was only in the North American version, so that has since been retconned. Dark Samus isn't the only clone of Samus, of course, and she also isn't the only one to possess a nickname. Metroid Fusion featured the second chronological clone of Samus, the Samus-Aran X-Parasite being its full name. Most of you already know it by its nickname, however, the abbreviation given to it by Adam, the SAS. This abbreviation follows the convention of practically every X mimic, as their full names are whatever their original name was with X-Parasite tacked on at the end, shortened to simply Name-X. Curiously, there is one creature that doesn't follow this naming convention. For whatever reason, the Ridley X Parasite isn't known as Ridley X, but rather as Neo Ridley. Speaking of everyone's favorite unkillable space dragon has a couple more titles to himself beyond his X-Parasite clone's unique nickname. I won't be counting names like Meta Ridley, Omega Ridley, or Proteus Ridley as I did Neo Ridley, because unless I'm mistaken, the former three are official names, whereas Neo Ridley is not. That leaves Ridley with two titles to his name. One is Geoform 187, a code name given to him by the Space Pirates, presumably as the name that they know him by in their databases without having to specifically mention Ridley by his real name. The other title belonging to the Space Dragon is the Cunning God of Death, which comes from the Japanese website that called him that in some official artwork, and in universe is probably a title bestowed upon him by his more devoted followers, given its rather grand nature. Ridley's leader, and the leader of the Space Pirates at large, Mother Brain has also been given a couple nicknames over the years. In the prequel manga, she is often simply referred to as Mother by the Space Pirates, for reasons unknown, though perhaps it's because she's the one that made them a galactic force in the first place, so in a way she's kind of the mother of the Space Pirates as a galactic faction. In Other M, she goes by the alias of Melissa Bergman, which is also often shortened to MB, a name which is given to her by Madeline Bergman, as the two formed a sort of mother-daughter relationship, and Madeline gave her a name with matching initials. The nickname also shares the initials of Mother Brain, which is supposed to be used as a hint to the player that Melissa is indeed Mother Brain. Don't overthink it. It's about as surface level dumb as it sounds. There are two more nicknames that come from Other M, which were at least executed better than Mother Brain's. James Pierce was a mole within Adam Malkovich's squad, who was sent to assassinate anyone with knowledge of the bottle ship and its machinations. Samus came to know him, before she knew his true identity, as the Deleter. James was sent on this mission by a corrupt splinter faction of the Federation, who Samus dubbed the Ringleaders, giving them their own nickname in the process. Like many antagonists across the series, Mother Brain and the Ringleaders had the end goal of creating and weaponizing the series' titular species, the Metroids. Metroid in itself is actually a nickname, as it's a sort of portmanteau which means ultimate warrior in Chozo. This is known to be because of Metroid Dread, where it has been discovered that Chozo is a coded language. What that means, essentially, is that each word in the Chozo language has a corresponding English word that is made to mean in Chozo. The word Metroid is the only exception to this rule that's currently known, as it translates to two words, which leads to the conclusion that Metroid is some sort of conjoining of two Chozo words into one. This one nickname applies to all Metroids across the series, such as the Queen and Omega Metroids, though the specific names such as Omega Metroid and Queen Metroids aren't nicknames in and of themselves. There are two Metroids in the franchise that do possess unique nicknames. One was already mentioned, as Dark Samus is known as Metroid Prime in her old form. The other would be the Hatchling from the end of Metroid 2, which many of you already know as the Baby Metroid, often shortened to the Baby, as it was called by Samus. Due to Mother Brain's experiments, it grew enormous and nigh invincible, allowing the creature to become the titular character of the game it featured in, the Super Metroid. It's also referred to as the Hatchling by Samus at the beginning of Fusion, which I find interesting that she'd specifically call it the Hatchling there, as Fusion and the North American version of Prime released the same day, and there, the Chozo calls Samus the Hatchling, so Samus had given the Baby Metroid one of her own nicknames, further solidifying their bond after the DNA transfusion. But of course that was retconned, so I digress. A few more beings in Metroid have abbreviated versions of their name, like the SAX. Much like the SAX, the security robot BOX comes from Metroid Fusion, and is known usually by its abbreviation of BOX, though the full meaning of the acronym is unknown. It's referred to by Adam as the security robot as well, and the map objective after defeating its X form calls it the BOX robot. Speaking of its X form, it's worth noting that this robot, in the same vein as Neo Ridley, does not have an X parasite added to the end of its name after being infected, so there is no Box X. Box isn't the only robot that's known by its abbreviation, as Dread introduced a line of practically unstoppable machines developed by the Exilian Star Corporation and forged with the strongest materials in the universe. These robots are meant to be research robots, and given their functions and their capabilities, they were given the name of Extraplanetary Multiform Mobile Identifier. Of course, that's one mouthful of a name, so everybody just calls him Emmy instead. The last of these highly capable robots, the Federation-developed Aurora units, are often abbreviated when being referred to by their specific unit number. So for example, Aurora Unit 242 would be referred to as AU-242. The remaining character nicknames in the series all come from the Prime games, and the only one of these remaining characters with more than one nickname is Gandrada. After being corrupted by Dark Samus, she came to be known as Mistress Gandrada by the pirates who were stationed alongside her on the pirate homeworld. The forms she mimics also have a naming system similar to the X Parasite, only with G instead of X, so if she's mimicking Rundus per se, in that form she would be Rundus-Gandrada, and that would be shortened to Rundus G. I'll just count this naming convention as one nickname though, because the actual nickname part of it is always the same, much like the X-Parasites or the Metroids. Prime 3 also gives one nickname to each of the two new species introduced. One Brionian, Brius I, was called the Liberator by his people. Why he was given the title is unknown, although given its nature, he likely had a large role in freeing his people and/or the planet, be it from some unknown war, or from some long-forgotten oppressors of the Brionians. The Elysians were created by the Chozo, and the very first of the Elysian kind was known by its descendants as the First. The title is pretty self-explanatory. The last nickname would belong to the Omega Pirate, whose real name is Elite Pirate Upsilon. He was given the title of Omega Pirate because he showed an extraordinary tolerance for Phazon, which the pirates used to infuse him with Phazon levels far beyond all safety precautions. This could imply that the other Elite Pirates also have unique names, but since that's never confirmed, I'll have to assume that all of them are just called the Elite Pirates, which Elite Pirate Upsilon shows doesn't count as a unique nickname. With that, lest I be mistaken, every nickname belonging to a character in the series has been covered, so it's time to move on to the nicknames held by the various locations in the series. The places of Metroid have far less titles than the characters do, but they do hold their own in this regard. Starting with Zebes, there are a couple of places in the Fortress world that have titles. While the planet itself has no nickname, unless you count the typo of the original name that called it Zebeth, though I don't know why you would, two regions have titles designated to them. One area, which is often referred to as Lower Norfair, isn't officially named that. It's really just a part of Norfair, and that's its name. However, it's also referred to as Ridley's Lair, Ridley's Hideout, and Mini-Boss Hideout 2 throughout several Metroid manuals and player's guides, which would canonize the titles. It's also called Ridley and Zero Mission, but because that's the official name of the area in that game, I'd say that one doesn't count as a nickname. Just the same as with Lower Norfair, the area that fans refer to as Lower Brinstar, which is officially just a part of Brinstar, is also referred to in various guides and manuals as Kraid's Lair, Kraid's Hideout, and Mini-Boss Hideout 1. And like before, I won't be counting the simplification to Kraid, since that's the official name of the area in Zero Mission. Both areas do have other titles, but they come from outside sources, such as Super Smash Bros., along with the composer for Nintendo Land calling the area Lower Norfair, like the rest of you average plebeian fans. Not me though. I've got a prestigious reputation to uphold. I can't sully it by not knowing what I'm talking about. Not knowing Lower Norfair's real name. Couldn't be me. While Zebes itself doesn't have any titles to its name, several planets in the series do in fact have their own nicknames. SR-388, the Metroid homeworld, is dubbed Ili Agar Nalima by the Chozo. The name translates to the Agar planet for now, as the English word Agar translates to isn't currently known. The same thing is done for planet ZDR, which the Chozo called Ili Tarim Nalima. Some of you might assert that the Chozo names are the official titles for the planets, but as reasonable as an assumption as that might be, SR-388 and ZDR are both called as such out-of-universe by Nintendo, and in-universe, that is what the planets are referred to by the Galactic Federation. Given that the Federation is the galactic government, it's hard to get a more official in-universe name than their designation, so the Chozo names for these planets are the nicknames, not the other way around. Going from Metroid 2 to Prime 2, Planet Aether is sometimes referred to as Light Aether, as a way to differentiate it from its twisted twin, Dark Aether. In Prime 3, Phase, the source of all Phazon, is referred to as the Promised Land by the space pirate in another side story, after he is presumably possessed by Dark Samus. Given that he calls it this, I believe it could be inferred that the rest of the possessed pirates refer to Phase as this title as well, although that claim can't be confirmed. I'd like to mention the space pirate homeworld from Prime 3 separately. There are two nicknames that the planet possesses. One is given to it by the space pirates, who named it Ertragus, which in their tongue means large booty. To the Federation, the planet was named SN-883, which, interestingly enough, is a flip of the number for the aforementioned SR-388. It also raises the small question of what the S stands for in both of them, along with the R and the N that distinguish the two. However, I'm digressing from the point here. The reason I saved this one for last is to mention that the two nicknames of this planet are not present in the North American version of the game, but are present in the Japanese version. That would still mean they're canon, just don't be surprised if you go looking for that logbook entry and don't find it, my North American viewers. With that, all the nicknames for Metroid's many locations have been discussed. The last slew of nicknames in the series are left to a variety of things in the franchise, and by things, I do mean things, from inanimate objects to projects to eras of time. Perhaps the most recognizable of these is the first assault on Zebes by Samus in the original Metroid game, which in Metroid 1's remake, she dubbed her Zero Mission. Given the name's prominence, it is quite well known. Another well-known nickname in this section is the title of Phazon, as it appears in every version of Prime 1. Given its mutagenic and rather destructive properties, the Chozo of Talon 4 called the deadly substance the Great Poison. This deeply negative name contrasts greatly with that of the pirate from another side story, who referred to the substance as Holy Phazon instead. While Phazon itself stops at those two titles, other Phazon-based entities have their own nicknames. The Phazon enhancement device from Prime 3 is often shortened to the abbreviated PED. In Samus's case, the PED is fused with her Chozo suit, becoming the PED suit, which I'll count as a nickname because it retains the abbreviation in it. The last of the Phazon-related nicknames belong to the Phazon meteorites which appeared in Corruption, which are often called Leviathans. The Talon 4 Chozo, the nickname aficionados that they are, came up with several more titles for their assortment of defense mechanisms against the spread of Phazon. The quasi-magical lock that the Chozo placed upon the impact crater that required the 12 Chozo artifacts to open was known as the Cipher. The The temple that Chozo built to hold the cipher, along with holding the monuments where the artifacts were to be placed, was called the Cradle. Speaking of the artifacts, each of them have 2 nicknames. One of their nicknames is shared, as the collective of these artifacts has been referred to as the 12 since the PAL version of the game was released. The other nicknames are unique to each artifact. I actually wasn't sure if these count as nicknames or not, but the Talon 4 Chozo made a lot of nicknames for things in this game, so I'll play it safe in this instance. Matching the name to the proper piece, they are Artifact of Strength, Artifact of Elder, Artifact of Wild, Artifact of Life Giver, Artifact of Warrior, Artifact of Chozo, Artifact of Nature, Artifact of Sun, Artifact of World, Artifact of Spirit, Artifact of Newborn, and Artifact of Truth. The only title I'd like to specifically highlight is the Artifact of Newborn, because it's located in a spot that can only be accessed after Samus gets the Phazon suit and has free domain over it. The artifact name is fitting then, as the Artifact of Newborn can only be obtained by the one who conquers Phazon, who the Chozo call the Newborn in the North American version of the game. It is literally the artifact of Samus, she who conquered Phazon. The thing that 180s this from impressively symbolic to unintentionally hilarious is that with enough energy tanks, Samus doesn't even need to get the Phazon suit in the North American version of the game. However, she can't do that in the Prime Remastered version, because Retro upped the damage and acceleration of damage dealt by Phazon. So the symbolism meant by their once shared moniker can be glossed over in the version this detail actually applies to by just having too much health. And you actually have to conquer Phazon in the version where this no longer applies. Nice one, Retro. Real good job on that one. The Luminoth tack on one more nickname, as after finding a way to utilize the planetary energy of Aether, they would come to call this energy the Light of Aether. Not to be outdone, the Brionians add multiple new nicknames to the list. The Primal Traditions, the Brionians' ancient magical powers, were also simply titled Magic. That, and the accompanying way of life that the Primals of Brio knew and practiced, were also known as the Old Ways, given their historical status. During the time where the aforementioned Old Ways, along with the newer ways of science, were in harmony with one another, Brio entered an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. The people of Brio dubbed such times the Age of Science. However, the Brionians had not heeded the warnings of the Chozo to find balance between new and old, and eventually conflict rose, and further spiraled into war. This dark era of the Brionian history was known as the Age of Schism. All that remains now is a laundry list of codenames the space pirates made, one to each unique thing. There's so many, and so many that nothing is known about, that I'm just gonna list them real quick for you. Are you ready? Well, then here goes. Vortex Outpost, Code Blue, Spiral Sector, Wanderer Class, V-Index, Research Outpost Glacier 1, Vertigo Strand, Project Helix, Project Titan, Research Team Sclera, Security Clearance ADR-13, Research Lab Aether, Research Lab Hydra, Flight Pattern Sigma 4, and last but not least, Project Dread. Still with me, Starfarer? Well, if you are, I have good news for you. All nicknames, titles, codenames, and everything else of that like in the canon series has now been covered by this broadcast. Well, technically there are 2 more, but they exist in a weird area, so I'll discuss them at the very end. With that topic covered, we can move on to the phrases of the franchise. Thankfully, for all our sakes, the phrases section isn't nearly as long as the nickname section. The criteria I use for finding a phrase is fairly subjective though, so I could be counting sayings that shouldn't be counted, and I could be missing something that belongs here. If you think I make any mistakes, feel free to tell me about it. What I was looking for in a phrase was something that is said more than once at some point, especially if said often by a specific group of people. That, and cases where the line said is very likely a phrase given its mannerisms, so something like a unique insult, a blessing, or wishing somebody good luck. The one I doubt any of you would argue with me on, not that I think it can really be argued, is Hadar Sen Olmen, a saying of the Monken tribe of Chozo in Metroid Dread. It's pretty definitely a saying, given that Ravenbeak says it twice, both in significant moments of the game, and he literally bears the Monken slogan on the garments he wears. The other phrase I believe unchallengeable is Adam's phrase. From Other M to Dread, we often hear him say, "Any objections, lady?" to Samus at the end of mission briefings, and it's common enough to easily count here. The only difference here is that this isn't a common saying, of course. This one is a little different from the rest in that it's a personal phrase, being spoken only by Adam thus far in the series. The others are more contestable, but are still quite likely phrases. The first of these is an insult, used by one of the space pirates in a Prime 2 log. Disgruntled by Science Team's orders to attempt at training Metroids, the pirate writing the log says he believes that they have vapor for brains. The phrase vapor for brains seems to be unique to the series, as searching for it yields only results of the scan from Prime 2, so I assume this is a common insult unique to the series, not something one pirate came up with himself. A few more likely phrases from Echoes comes from Luminoth, and specifically Umos, who says a couple things related to the Light of Aether. His phrases are, "May the light of Aether shine upon you," "May the light of Aether serve you well," and "Let the light of Aether be your guide." Given the prominence of the Light of Aether, and its importance to the Luminoth in their world, I believe these three phrases are often used by the Luminoth as ways to wish one another good luck. The other phrase that is a good luck message is more direct in dialect, and is spoken by Admiral Dane. Following his mission briefing for the 4 hunters at the beginning of Prime 3, he tells them, "Good luck and good hunting," before sending them off. I'm left to assume with the way it's presented, along with what's being said, that the phrase is a common one used to show respect and to wish good luck among bounty hunters, something the Chadmiral picked up from working with them at some point. Again, most of these can't be confirmed, but I think the last several are very likely, and the first 2 are unobjectable. I'd like to mention real quick as well, just for my sake, that the phrase "Great Moons of Zebes" comes from the Captain N comics. I knew I'd heard it from somewhere, it turns out I did. It was just from a non-canon source. Oh yeah, and how could I forget? The Hunter is among us. With all that out of the way, we can move on to the last segment of this broadcast, the rankings. Who or what has the most canon nicknames, and who's got the most sayings? Let's find out. For phrases, every person in group has 1 phrase, except for the Luminoth, who have 3. Pretty simple. As for the nicknames, most just have 1, so I'll list them all at the bottom as other. For those with more than 1 title, Ridley, Gandreda, Phazon, the Phazon enhancement device, the Chozo artifacts, and the Primal traditions all round out the best of the rest, or rather the most of the least, with 2 titles apiece. Closer to the mountaintop, Mother Brain, Metroid 2's Hatchling, Security Robot BOX, Lower Brinstar, and Lower Norfair tie all for 3rd place with 3 nicknames each. Taking the silver and losing the gold is Dark Samus, who wins 2nd place convincingly with 7 nicknames. However, Samus is going to take the top spot for the most nicknames throughout the series. If you've been paying attention though, you might remember that I said Samus has only 7 nicknames earlier in the broadcast, so you'd think she would be tied with Dark Samus. Well, remember those nicknames in the weird gray area I mentioned earlier in the episode? Well, that's the tiebreaker here. I save these nicknames because they're sort of hard to place. Basically, when playing Metroid Prime Hunters, any of the hunters that are NPCs are listed by their name, or at least a part of the name, followed by bot. For Samus, that name is Sambot. The reason this one is weird is because they aren't actually called that anywhere in the universe itself, but it's still in a canon game, so it kind of counts, but also kind of doesn't. Because of this conundrum with the bot nickname being in a sort of void space, I'm going to count it as a half of a nickname, giving Samus the edge over her dark doppelganger, 7.5 to 7. Of course, this means the rest of the hunters get half a nickname, so don't worry, Silex is still below the poverty line. The other nickname that I put here is the nickname of Samus's gunship in Prime 1. The ship is called Thrush Eterna by James H. Dargy, the guy who modeled and textured the ship, meaning he kind of made it. I put this here because it's called as such by its creator, but the name doesn't actually appear anywhere in the game, so I'm not sure what to do with it. Half a point for the gunship in the meantime. Also, funny side note, while doing my due diligence researching for this broadcast, I found that the pre-release versions of Metroid Prime refer to the gunship as the Stealth Strike Corvette. Does this mean Corvette is canon in Metroid? Many are saying yes. With that, everything has been covered, and we find ourselves at the conclusion of this episode. Of course, if you believe I've missed any nicknames or phrases that should be here, count in any alternate titles or sayings that I shouldn't have, or if anything else is on your mind, please feel free to let me know in the digital reply box down below. Station feedback helps the channel grow and improve with time, and the chance for conversation and constructive criticism is always appreciated. That will be all for today's broadcast. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed your holiday season, and as I've so cleverly kept the only quasi-canon phrase for the very end all broadcasts long, I'll see you next mission. I forgot one. Yeah, the Samus and Joey manga refers to the events of Metroid 1, and perhaps some of the events close to it, chronologically speaking, as the Metroid incident. So yeah, I forgot that one.